Meeting in progress.
Okay, Dennis, I want to thank you for coming and being part of this, where it's exciting. I use Digirig. I've used it myself. It's really a nice little device, and you've done a great job with it. Thank you so much, and thank you for coming today. You did send me the gift certificate for the drawing, but I don't have the numbers. Yeah, I don't know how you want to do that. Just let me know.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor and pleasure, and thank you to everybody for attending the presentation. Today I'm going to talk about Digirig specifically, but also cover a lot of topics about digital modes in general. So what they are, what they are not, what are the benefits of using digital modes. We're going to talk about software and hardware, including Digirig. I'm going to touch on troubleshooting digital modes because anybody who went ahead and set up experienced some difficulties at some point. So I helped thousands of hams to helped with the setup for digital mode. So I have quite a knowledge base on how to address most common issues. So shortly about myself, I'm Denis Grisak, amateur call sign K0TX. I was licensed first in 2020, and shortly after I started operating on the air, I found that some of the equipment for digital modes is not optimal. So having background in software and hardware, I designed Digirig interfaces first for myself, and then I shared the design online, and people started asking to make those. So that became my pretty much full-time business now, and I'm very lucky to make hobby into my basically day job. So very fortunate. So let's start with the digital modes. So here's a definition that I came up with based on some other definitions to fit it in one sentence. So digital modes is a transmission of digital data with analog radios by encoding it into audio tones. So the most important part is here that you can use your regular audio capable radio for digital modes. All we do is put zeros and ones into beeps and boops, and we send it over the regular radio. This can be HF radio, or this can be direct line of sight, UHF, VHF radio, but the principle is the same. Those who were experimenting with technology in 90s remember dial-up modems. This is the same principle there. Basically, what we do, connect digital device like a computer, tablet, or phone through the hardware that converts the digital data into the audio tones, and then we use existing medium. Back then it was the landline. Now we use the radio, the ham radio, to transmit that information as audio tones elsewhere, and then we reverse that process and we recover the digital data. So how is it different from other modes of operations? For example, from the phone, regular phone, obviously we're not using voice here, but we're using the same audio channel here, so that's understandable. CW is somewhat digital kind of vibe, but it's human operated typically, and we have tones of the same frequency and the absence of tones, so it's not exactly the tone modulation, it's more of like presence and absence of tones. And now the digital voices, there's sometimes confusion between digital modes and digital radio. So there are standards like DMR, Fusion, and D-Stars. These are not the digital modes we're talking here. All of these require specialized hardware. If you continue with analogy with the dial-up modems, these modes like DMR, Fusion, and D-Star, they're more like a network card versus dial-up modem. So we're not using the audio channel. We modulate the RF carrier directly by the data in the mode. So and these modes require specialized equipment. So if your radio is not DMR specific, it will not be able to do DMR. While with the digital mode that we're talking about today, all your radio needs to be capable is regular audio. There's no specific requirements other than that. So, and there are some other digital modes that, like, for example, Meshtastic. Lots of you heard about it. The same thing in this case, the data modulates the carrier directly. You cannot make your analog radio into Meshtastic radio. And the same with Wi-Fi and Arden. And a little bit of exception here is a protocol like M17 and 3DV. They do use wideband audio channel, and they are capable of encoding voice and sending voice in the digital format. So in that respect, they're somewhat like DMR, but they do not require um, a specialized hardware for that. So the bottom line is you can enjoy your existing uh, to experiment with digital modes using additional equipment like Digirig or other interfaces, or the equipment that's maybe already inside of your radio. So we'll continue here. So let's talk about advantages and some criticism of digital modes. So we'll start with low power and weak signal modes. So what computers can hear is more than we can hear. So that allows the digital modes to be operated with very modest equipment. So for example, just earlier today, I contacted Australia out of Colorado with a 20 watt on the basically the wire antenna in the attic. So it doesn't require a lot of expensive equipment to operate digital modes. And what they can hear, we oftentimes cannot hear. So the performance on the low power and weak signal is very impressive here. And also next is the density of the data. So the digital modes can operate with very little bandwidth. For example, one of the very popular digital modes, FT8, it uses sub 3 kilohertz bandwidth, the regular voice channel, and there can be 50 stations packed into the same channel that normally would be several operators just running pile up. Here you can hear clearly dozens and dozens of stations just within the single audio channel. Now, if we look at the statistics for the QSOs, the digital modes, specifically FT8, there are more than half of all the contacts logged, partially because they're very popular. Another thing is that because it's related to the computer, you initiate the QSOs from the computer. Lots of the contact information is already there. So the logging is just a click or even automatic logging. It doesn't require additional notepads or writing and then transferring to the computer. So it makes it very easy. And it also makes it easy to make contacts depending on the modes. So I already touched on the DX with the modest equipment. So you can operate with 5 watts and you can do the DX. You can do lots of contacts, and it doesn't take 10 acre, with antenna farm and $100,000 worth of equipment. So what that resulted in is that the hobby is opened for younger people with very modest income and without necessarily owning properties. You can live in a rental apartment and you can spend a couple of $100 and you can enjoy lots of benefits and excitement of ham radio without having resources that some other ham operators have to do the impressive things that associate with the hobby. So where would we use digital modes? Additionally to obvious fun elements of that, it's widely used in preparedness and emergency communications because you can send digital data. For example, if you need to send a spreadsheet, you can send a WinLink message through the regular HT with the tablet or computer attached to it, and it will take a lot of time to transfer the same data through the voice, and the higher probability of some mistakes or error in the transmission. So that's why AMCOM and preparedness widely use digital modes and digital interfaces for communication in this situation. So another popular use case for digital modes is parks on the air and summits on the air. The conditions can be difficult, and although fun on the voice pile up is very, you know, everybody can enjoy the pile up on the voice, but it's possible that you go out in the park and the conditions are not great and you cannot even get to the activation. The digital modes will always pretty much save your activation. You can just jump on digital and have dozens of contacts within minutes. It's easy and it's fun. And also because of low power requirements and a high weak signal performance, it's widely used is in Earth, basically moon bounds. You can have very weak response from bounce from the other objects, including moon, and digital modes are very popular for that. And some of the modes started from the application in space, and then later were adopted by ham radio operators. So International Space Station, you can see a picture from the module on the International Space Station featuring a Kenwood TM710. This is interoperational radio system there for ham purposes. And time to time, they run slow scan TV events. So you can use your regular UHF, VHF radio, nothing fancy about it, with very modest antenna. If you can make some sort of Yagi, you can certainly receive very clear signal, and it's kind of amazing and thrilling to receive images from space. So DX and contesting obviously gives a lot of opportunities, lots of traffic on digital modes on HF. So you'll make a lot of contacts if you give it a try. Because computer radio is connected to the computer, including audio and in many cases computer control, allowing to set the frequencies and activate features. You can remotely operate the station. So basically you can log into your computer that is interfaced with the radio remotely and operate your station this way. And there's applications in science and experimentation, obviously. For example, you can see if your antenna works, if your system works by utilizing services like PSK Reporter. It's a website where it will show you on the map who can hear your signal. So you can call on FT8 or Whisper, and that will show the propagation of your signal. You can troubleshoot your system with the digital modes, and you can experiment with antennas and see how it works. So that's very useful there. So the criticism of the digital modes can be that it's less personal, which, in some cases it's criticism, in some cases it's not. Somebody more like myself, I don't necessarily dive into long rack chews on the air, but operating digital modes allows me to experiment and play with the equipment and enjoy the hobby more. And there's a little bit of, people work hard to get some of the awards on DX and stuff, and it appears to be undeserved on digital modes. Well, I mean, to some extent, it's understandable, but also these are virtual awards. Nobody gets paid for it or anything like that. So people should not take it too seriously. I mean, you know what you did, you know how hard it was. So I wouldn't value that too much. So I mean, it is what it is. There's some ways that the future makes things easier, so I wouldn't worry about too much. So there may be other ones we can talk about, but that's pretty much what I heard about, what people say. Obviously, there's more equipment to compared to voice or CW, but with the way things are, including the Digirig interface, part of the need of necessity that I saw is to simplify the hardware, and now it's less. If you're operating remotely, it's fewer things to carry around, and it's really easy to set up. We'll touch on that. So next, let's talk about the popular modes available to ham radio operators for different use cases. So for contesting, typically it's done on HF. So we're talking single sideband operation of the radio. So there are modes like FT4, FT8, and more of a traditional one, RTTY, really. So basically, in contesting, it's like a quick dating. You're only interested in racking up the contacts as quickly as you can, as far as you can. So there's not going to be any open chat or rec-chew. You just exchange call signs, signal reports, and pleasantries, 73s, and you move on. So FT8 is basically that. There's this, I operated earlier today, and I could see about 50 stations easily, and you just click on the call sign you're interested in making contact, and it takes about maybe 2 minutes. There are 30 seconds time frames for each transmission, and stations alternating. That's why this mode requires the synchronization of the clock, so everybody's starting receiving and transmitting at correct times. FT4 is similar to FT8, but it's even more compressed. It's even more contesting oriented. So between FT8 and FT4, there's probably about 65% of logged contacts over the ham radio. There are probably many more contacts on the voice that are not being logged. But if you look at the statistics of logged contacts, you can see that FT8 is by far the most popular mode and has the most contacts in the logs. So going to real-time chat when people just take turns talking at any intervals and have a open conversation, rec-chew type. So there's a JS8 call using similar protocol as FT8, but it's not timed windows to communicate. So you can basically type for as long as you want and then change terms. RTTY, another one that can be used for open conversation on HF. PSK32, older one, but still somewhat in use. And VARA AC. All of these modes are associated with some software, typically free. So on the left, you can see a picture of FLDG and select a menu where you would select the digital modes, and you can see that there is well over a dozen modes available in that app, with some sub modes available for each. So all of these software applications are typically free, so it's very easy to jump in and start experimenting. So going back to our table here, for the FM radios, for the text, you can use your HT or mobile radio that is UHF, VHF capable, and you can install VARA AC for the real-time chat. Now the messaging and location, very popular mode APRS. Some radios that are more expensive might have that internally. So you can interoperate between the radios that have that internally and your regular radio that is not APRS capable, but by adding a sound card and a computer, you can make it APRS capable. What that will allow you is to report your positioning, which can be tracked through the internet if you want, and it will allow you to exchange messages, basically like a chat, but it will wait for the station to receive the messages. It doesn't have to be real time. Very popular mode, and the benefit of operating it through the computer, even if you have a APRS capable radio, is that you can type messages on a real keyboard instead of going through the radio's interface, which is typically very minimal. So let's go to emails and files, very popular, including for MCOM and for preparedness. So this is WinLink. WinLink is the application that basically allows you to write emails, make attachments, and then additionally to WinLink, you'll need a piece of software that will convert those emails into the tones. There are additional software for HF and FM mode. So like, for example, it can be VARA HF and VARA FM, or it can be sound modem if you want to use packet. So these typically rely on the local infrastructure. If you were to send files and it's not direct between two nodes, it goes through the so-called digipeater. So you would want to talk to somebody in your area to learn about what infrastructure is available and what protocols they use. These are a little bit more involved just because there are two pieces of software. If you can start with something like FT8, then it will be less of a learning curve than jumping straight into WinLink and VAR FM. So next is images. As I mentioned, SSTV is the slow scan TV. It's basically like a fax machine over the radio, except it comes in color. Recently, there was a SSTV event in International Space Station. I just would walk outside with little Yagi antenna I made out of the tape measure, and I received clear images out of space from space station, and it can be space station satellites, it can be terrestrial stations. There is a SSTV frequency on HF, so you can exchange basically like QSL cards through the images on the air. And I mentioned science earlier. So WHISPER is a protocol that studies the propagation in real time, and it's amazing what HF can do. You can run milliwatts and be heard across the continents if you give it enough time. You slow down the data, and the WHISPER is the protocol that is specifically designed for studies of propagation. Here at the bottom, I have honorable mentions of early protocols that are not very popular anymore, but nothing stops anybody from using them if they wanna. This is Pactor, Prob, Olivia, and such. So there's not a lot of traffic with these online. So unless you arrange the contact, you're probably gonna have hard time finding a counterpart for these. All right, so let's move to equipment and software. So first thing that we're gonna mention is that there are variants to how you can implement digital modes. So it can be so-called TNC, terminal node clients. These are the interfaces between the radio and the computer that do encoding internally, and they only can do one type of encoding. So typically it's so-called packet. For example, APRS, the one of the protocols for positioning and mention and messaging that we talked about earlier, uses packet. This is the type of data encoding into the tones. So if you were to run APRS, you have choice to use TNC or the sound card. That's another option. So, but TNC is one trick pony. It makes it convenient, but it does it internally, but it can only do one mode. So if you were to try FT8, or if you were to try to do slow scan TV, the TNC will not work. So this device that incorporates encoding, it's close equivalent to dial-up modem, because we would feed data into dial-up modem and the audio will come out. Another alternative, which Digirigs are, is the sound card. The difference is, with the sound card based digital interfaces, the encoding happens in the software on the computer, and you can change the encoding schemes by just switching between different software. So although TNCs have their benefits in terms of that there's very little setup with them, the sound card based interfaces like Digirig have benefit of the flexibility that you can run any audio-based encodings on it and just switch the software as you need to move from one to another. So one thing that is worth mentioning, that some of the radios, especially more expensive desktop radios, have the equipment in them. So you will not need to purchase anything additionally to operate digital mode. So all you need is the USB cable directly between your radio and the computer, and you can run the software. Nothing else is required. So the popular radios that have the interface in them, for example, is ICOM 7300. So very popular radio, has the sound card type interface in the radio itself. No additional equipment is required. Another one is Yaesu 991A, new Yaesu FTX1, ICOM 703, Zygo 6100 and 6200. So there, before you invest in the additional equipment, however much I would like to take your money, make sure that you already you don't have the radio that's already have that in it. There's absolutely no reason and no benefit to adding external interface, with small exceptions, but I wouldn't bother initially with that. If you have interface in the radio, just go ahead with it and you should be good to go to start with. So another alternative is to use the sound card that is already in your computer. It's possible to just connect that audio input and output from the sound card on your computer into the radio, and that will do some of the business. But there are several issues with that. You need the way to key up the radio. The computer needs to control when the radio needs to key up and start transmitting. In some cases, you can work around with the Vox where it's available inside of the radio, but that also has a problem, that the Vox in the radio is optimized for the voice communication. So it will lose part of the transmission in the beginning, and it might hang too long in the end of the transmission, basically talking over this other station responding to you. So those are not optimal choices. It can work out in a pinch, but it's a treacherous kind of path there. Another thing is that the audio is not brought to the same level, so that it may be difficult to match the levels to make radio accept the audio and hear it correctly. So it's worth experimenting if somebody wants to, but ultimately, if you want smooth operation, the specialized interfaces are the way to go. And so let's continue with the external interface models. When I joined the hobby, the interfaces, audio interfaces existed already. I looked at them, and some were good for some use cases, some were not good. So that's why the Digirig came to be. But additionally to Digirig, there is a classic ones called signaling. There is Rig Expert one, I believe, and some other choices. So Digirig becoming the kind of standard of the hobby. One of the things it's very portable. It doesn't have any knobs or switches, so it's ready to go out of the bag, and it works equally great in the field and in the shack. So cables. Every time you connect computer to the radio, obviously you'll need the cables. So you'll need to make sure interface is connected to USB on the computer. And depending on your radio, there are different cabling options. Some radios, they have accessory port, and this is preferred way to connect to the radio. So if accessory ports are available, that's where you want to connect the digital mode interface. If not, the radio can still be interfaced through the microphone and the headphone connector. So depending on the model, for example, anything from $20 Baofeng to the tube radios to super expensive radios, as long as they can transmit and receive audio, they can be interfaced, and it's a matter of the cables. I carry cables for all the popular models. It's possible to homebrew the cables. There's discussions in the forums for more exotic types of radios and how to connect them. And it's just a matter either of finding off-the-shelf cable or building one yourself. Okay, so now the software, we mentioned the modes, and the mode of operation is allowed by the software that you run. And depending on the platform, there are lots of free software and great choices there. So for FT8, FT4, and some of the other modes, the popular software is WSJTX. It's available on Windows, it's available on Mac, on Linux. So if you have a computer, you can run WSJTX, and it's one of the easiest ones to configure. So I would recommend that for troubleshooting anytime. JTS call is the similar to WSJTS, except for chat that as we discussed earlier. So keyboard to keyboard chat. FLDG, another popular software that covers a lot of legacy modes and some of the modern modes. Now, WinLink and VARA, those are for email, and additionally to that, you'll need some of them or VARA depending on which mode you're operating, and so on. These are the softwares for the computers, for desktop type computers and laptops. Now, becoming more and more popular, the apps on the Android and iOS on the mobile platforms. So there are more and more software available for these platforms, which are, to be frank, optimal for mobile operation. If there is a good software on a tablet, there's no reason to hold full-size laptop in the field. So, and there are now apps, for example, like Radio Mail or APRS Droid that are available in app stores that you can use Digirig interfaces and talk to your radio and use it for digital modes. Now, another category is suites, for example, like HRD or TechPrep or SAMCOM tools. These are packages that combine multiple softwares, and sometimes they include login component to it, antenna rotation, and other things. So these typically are subscription based. I haven't seen the suites that are totally free. The reason for that is they require constant development and maintenance, so that's why the creators of those apps they typically have the subscription based model there. There are additional services and apps, for example, like Grid Tracker. It will see the contacts that you make in real time and show connections on a big map on your screen. It will show all the traffic that it can see coming through your radio. It's very nice visualization. And if you're specifically hunting for a particular trophy or award, you can see which areas you already worked and which ones you want to jump on. And I mentioned PSK reporter service earlier. That allows you to see your propagation. You can see who can hear you, and you can use that for antenna tuning, radio testing, and things like that. So these are the hardware and software components of digital modes. So now let's move to functions of the interface. So on the left, you can see the rendering of Digirig Mobile's internal board, and each chip on the board has a particular function. In general, sound card-based interfaces need to facilitate transmission of the audio between the computer and the radio. That's the most principal component. When radio hears the audio, it needs to go to the computer. Computer does the decoding, and when computer ready to send audio to remote station, it goes back into the radio. So next function is PTT control. When computer generates the audio which it wants on the air, it needs to key up the radio. There are different ways to do that. You can do that through a specific hardware line in accessory port, the same as you push the button on your microphone. It can do through the Vox on your radio, which, as we discussed earlier, it's not preferred method to do it, but it's possible. When audio comes in from the interface, the radio will key up the transmission automatically. And it's possible to do through the command between the radio and the computer coming through the communication channel. Some of the radios support serial cat control, on which we'll touch in a moment. But this is basically a communication channel other than payload, other than the audio. This channel allows the computer to tell radio to tune to the frequency, switch band, activate, deactivate features, and things like that. So it's also possible to key up the radio through one of the command if that channel is available in the radio and command is supported. So we mentioned received audio and transmitted audio. So now back to the serial cat control. Some of the radios, not all of them, but some will have a serial port on them. And Digirig has serial chip that will allow computer to talk to the radio and make it more convenient to operate. This function is optional. Even if the radio doesn't have the cat control, or if you choose not to use it, that's fine. You can always tune the radio manually to the frequency and let the interface just send audio and control the PTT. But it's nice when it's available, so it's worth using it. The nuance of the serial communication and depending on the type of the radio. There can be different electrical levels, and the Digirig can accommodate all of these different levels. It just needs to be pre-configured for specific radio. For example, if it's some Yaesu 817, that would be a logic levels voltages, basically going from 0 volt to 3.3 volts. I'm not gonna get too nerdy with it, but if you go into all the radios, it's a different voltage range, and those are not compatible. ICOMs use yet another standard. Digirig supports all of those, so those can be configured and enjoyed depending on the radio you have. So additionally, the same serial port can be used for functions like programming of the radio. For example, like HTs, like Baofangs and Yaesus and things like that, or the mobile radios, they can be programmed from the computer in bulk instead of going through the screens and punching in all the frequencies and tones and things like that. You can basically fill out like a spreadsheet on the computer and upload that in bulk through the serial port to the radio. It's a convenience feature. Again, it's nothing to do with digital modes directly, but because the interface has serial port in it, it can be used for that function as well. So moving on to troubleshooting. So as I mentioned, over the years I helped thousands of operators get on digital modes, and I can basically help diagnose lots of these issues. And I worked out certain methods to how to troubleshoot, how I advise people do that. And first thing is back to fundamentals. What I mean here is that before any of the digital modes can be enjoyed, your radio gotta work. You need to have a working antenna. You need to have sufficient power to transmit. You have to hear other stations and things like that. So before any troubleshooting on the digital mode starts, make sure you can make a regular voice QSO at the power you're trying to achieve and at the distance that you're trying to operate, because digital modes will pull out weak signal, but if there is no signal or the radio is not working right, connecting computer will not fix that. So next step would be simplify until it works. Sometimes people want to pile everything up, flip the switch, and sometimes it works, but oftentimes it doesn't. So the idea is focus on every individual function, like we were talked about the functions of the digital interface. Each of those can be diagnosed and tested individually. So if something doesn't work right away, make it simpler and simpler and simpler until it does. Something always works. When somebody says nothing works, I'm sure computer turned on, so a computer works, radio turned on, so that works. So take your wins where they are, try to make sure things work, that they work, and then build out of that. And again, like for example, when you go to the choice of the digital modes, WinLink would be more difficult to set up comparing to FT8, because FT8 uses just one application. And if WinLink doesn't work, pull back to the simpler one. So there are fewer knobs to turn and there are fewer mistakes to make. So idea is to basically get to as simple of the option as you can get, to start from something that works and then build out, which that's where we get one change at a time. So once we get to where something works, we add one thing at a time, checking every time that it still works. This way, if something stops working, we know where it broke and we can focus on that feature. And part of that is isolating concerns. So we talked about the interface features. For example, once we plug the interface into the computer, we don't need to worry about any other things other than making sure that computer can detect the interface and we can see the components of like sound card and things like that. So once that works, we don't need to go back to that. So that works, we move to troubleshooting the next thing, and we don't touch things that work unless they're somehow linked and related. So that's what isolating concerns are. So some of the issues that people experience are um, more exotic types, more or less obvious is RFI, audio levels, and time synchronization. Everything may be looking like it works, and then all of a sudden it doesn't. Like it's totally irrational kind of situation. What can happen is RFI. Basically, when station transmits, due to configuration of the antenna, feed lines, and choking, it's possible that the power from the transmission can get into the low frequency wires like accessory wires and disrupt the communication with the sound card. Anytime you have the circumstance where everything works okay until the first time you transmit, the RFI would be first suspect. Like when things break kind of irrationally, illogically, RFI is the suspect because it will make things glitch. And once things are glitching, anything can happen. A typical situation, for example, is with HTs using internal antenna, like a rubber duck antenna. These are notorious for not having the counterpoise. You have radiating element on your HT, and the counterpoise to that antenna is only the metal in the chassis of the radio, and you holding the little ground screw on the side, you become the part of the counterpoise. If you're not holding the radio, that part goes away, and radio and antenna will be looking for anywhere to pull that energy to compensate, to pump into antenna. That includes accessory cables, so interface like a Digirig or any other interface connected to the radio. Antenna will try to use that shell on that accessory cable as the part of the counterpoise system, inducing pretty high RF voltages in it, and that will throw things off and break communication. So RFI is something to look at. The solutions would be the choking, counterpoising, and improving antenna overall. So these are discussed in detail in the support material. Now, audio levels is obvious one. If radio not providing a correct signal to the interface or vice versa, things can get too quiet, or it can be distortion through clipping and things like that. So this is something to look out for when things are working in principle but not performing the way they should. So it's always important to make sure the audio levels are correct. And the time sync is the one that bites people too, because they can hear the stations and everything seems to work right, but there's no decodes and no exchange. For some modes, it's important that the computer is set to correct time to within a second, because if you're not listening at the right time or not transmitting at the right time, you're not going to be able to interpret the data, and nobody can understand what you're sending. So with some modes like FT8, FT4, and such, it's always first thing you get in the park or you try to set up, you need to make sure your time on the computer is correct. And there are different ways to do that. You can do that with if you're online, you can sync with the server, you can do it with GPS, you can do it using other methods through your watch and things like that. Take notes. I mean, if it's not something that you do every day, you'll forget things. So when you set up the station and something works, take notes, make a card, so you know the steps next time around. And things like you might plug in interface in a different USB port and you need to set it up all over again. And if you didn't take notes, you'll be stepping on the same breaks along the way, and something that you can avoid if you have something to reference in that regard. So another thing is touches on the previous one thing at a time and isolating concerns. People will just keep trying and trying and trying the same thing and expecting different result. A result is a well-known definition of insanity. There is no need to suffer in silence. If you spend several hours and nothing works and you cannot find the answer, there are lots of resources available. There is no need to continue. I have people call and say I spent 10 hours on this. There's not enough things to turn and try to plug the other way to do that for 10 hours. So it must have been going in circles with the same thing. Doesn't make any difference with these systems that deterministic like computers. If you plug it exactly the same way, you're gonna get exactly the same result. Read some more. If answer is not coming to you, ask for help, and there's lots of people willing to help, and there's no need to make it more suffering than it has to be to get on the air with digital modes. So let's now get to the Digirig stuff. So Digirig interfaces are very popular for the reason that they are easy to use, they're reliable, they're inexpensive, and they come with the cables, the kits for most of the popular radios. If there is a radio that lots of people use, the chances are that there is a cable because they are open source and community driven. It means that people would go in the forum and say, hey, I have this radio, my friends have this radio, we want a cable, and I will design the cable and it will become available in store. The design is well proven. Anybody's interested can download the schematics, go over them. So it started out as the personal project. There was no intent to commercialize it, and it's only commercialized to extent to stay in business and to keep going. So if you go to digirig.net, you'll find the store, you'll find the listings for all the cables and interfaces, and you'll find the resources to select the cables, to select the type of the interface that matches your use cases the best. And there are lots of support materials as well. Among the support materials, there are reference tables to find the cables. There are comparison tables for different types of interfaces, showing the features and use cases. And there is very active support forum, thousands and thousands of posts there. Lots of people actively participating. Every day there's new questions and new answers. You can always put the model of your radio in the tags or search particular question, and you'll find most of the questions answered already. And if you research any topic related to digital modes, chances are the Google will bring you to Digirig forum just because of how huge the database and of information Digirig forum is. So as I mentioned, the cables are relatively affordable and they are of high quality. All cables are shielded. All cables have ferrite to reduce RFI, and they are made for specific radios, and they are in operation for years. So there's a track record of quality in these. And as I mentioned, this is a small company. I'm the sole owner of operator of it, and I'm located in Colorado. So your orders will likely be shipped out of Colorado, typically the same day, unless you meet me at the ham events that I frequently attend, then it can be in person. So about having good time on the air. So here in the picture, that's me in a Bryce Canyon in Utah using ISO FT891 with Digirig DR891 and to do some park activation. So recommendations for that, as I mentioned, if you have radio that is equipped with internal interface, use it. I mean, there is no need to purchase anything. More important that you go on the air and enjoy the hobby. If you want to build a cable, if you don't want to spend on store bought cables, all the schematics are published in the store. So feel free to experiment. Or if you have exotic radio that doesn't have cables in store, ask a question. We'll figure out the pinout. Don't be shy about DIY. If you want to use homebrew sound card or make a clone of Digirig, that's fine too. Part of the hobby is experimentation and just getting into these rabbit holes and just doing geeky stuff. So that's what brought me and keeps me in this hobby. and I'm sure many of you will enjoy that too. Especially when it comes to FM modes, line of sight modes, see what's available in your area. That means that there has to be some infrastructure maintained by some other operators like digipeaters. Those are the stations that listen to the signals, and they will gateway the signals into the internet for you, or they will relay the messages and things like that. Especially on FM, when you rely on line of sight, it's important to know what's available in your area. So talk to locals, find out what they use, organize, maybe set something up, and start enjoying these things for fun and preparedness. When internet goes out, be that the storm or flood or something like that damages local infrastructure, having these things available, it's important. And having being prepared and with all these things being tested and knowing us working, it's very important. Sometimes it's also can be used in like sports events here in Colorado. When if we go in the canyons and there could be no reception, so we practice and test our equipment to relay messages related to such things like sporting events. If somebody had injury on course and things like that. So that can be used with digital modes. Embrace the journey, be methodical about it. So that's part about hobby. Important not to get frustrated, and digital modes are a little bit more involved than the voice, and in terms of equipment, a little bit more than CW. Even though the learning curve of CW is much steeper, anybody can jump in digital mode, be on the air and enjoy it fully within a couple of days max. Sometimes it can be, within an hour, depending on your background. But it's part of geeking out and learning and trying and troubleshooting. It's part of makes it hobby fun. It's not a consumer type entertainment kind of hobby. It's part of it is technical, and that's the beauty about it. So taking it outside, as I mentioned, equipment like digital modes equipment is smaller now, and it's optimal for just going into the park, and I learned about more places that I would never visit otherwise by just doing parks on the air activations. You look at the map, like, I wonder what this place looks like. Let's drive, and it's beautiful. It's just fun to go and take and enjoy the radio outside, and that stimulated the hobby for younger population too, because not everybody can operate out of rented apartments and things like that. So with modest equipment, you can experience rush of the pile up the way that big stations do and exotic stations do. Once you get in the air in the park, you get on the air with voice, and you're a very popular guy all of a sudden because everybody wants that park activated. So, and with the digital modes as well. So don't be shy. Just have your station in your car and go and play, and you'll see beautiful places. You'll people will come and talk to you, and it's great experience. Now, the social aspect, even though digital is a little bit less social than some of the other modes, you still make connections, and you make them on the air, you make them online in the communities like forums and groups and Facebook and whatnot. And very important to also meet people offline, join your local club, talk about digital modes, have a just to play with your radio with other people too. Like our local club, we have separate group that is focused on going and playing and experimenting. People that would just throw message in a group like, we're going doing park activation, we're gonna go play with Meshtastic or whatever else. Regardless of what you do, try to make it social. Don't be stranger. Don't just sit in your shack and rack the contacts in your log. Try to make it social and enjoy it outside and with other people. And the final point is it's a hobby. I mean, I know there's lots of egos involved. There's some money involved here and there with vendors and whatnot, but let's not make too big deal out of it. And whatever wins or loses or frustrations, keep perspective. It's just a hobby. It's there for us to have fun. There's obviously science and preparedness and this and that, all the other like missions of the ham radio, but nobody forced us to be in it, and we wanted to be in it to enjoy it. So let's just enjoy it, regardless what comes with it. No need for any like ego clashes on anything like that. I have this at work, I have that. It wasn't too hard for you as it was for me, and things like that. So don't pay attention to sad hams. There's not too many in digital modes. I haven't seen any rudeness or anything like that. That's very uncommon. So regardless, it's just hobby. And that's about it for today. I think we're about wrapping up time-wise. So this is my first presentation that I do like that. And if you have any questions and feedback, like this guy in the picture, that was when I was operating in the field. I lured this guy with walnuts, and yeah, he probably some questions about my equipment. So if you have any questions about operating digital modes, equipment, feedback, I welcome that now.
Thank you very much, Dennis. That was a great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for attending.
Does anybody in the audience have any questions? All right. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you.